Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the CAYACast. We've got Lorcan over here, Bradley, of course, Gina in the corner, me, Mila, and our special guest, Xara. In this episode, we spoke about...
Genderless strip. Sorry.
In this episode, we spoke about religion, childhood trauma,
How
your
it
inner
affects
child,
each other.
how it affects you, PTSD, all that good stuff.
We also
That's
talked
true.
about like fashion.
Yeah, we
Psychedelics.
Psychedelics.
Fashion, psychedelics. You know, this is going to be a good one.
It's
You're gonna want
jam-packed, as we
more.
always say.
Jam-packed.
And we talked about
definitely.
mental health.
We did actually talk
Point
about mental
score.
health in this one.
And
Make
my
sure
granny Carrie. So,
and Mila's granny.
and Mila's granny Carrie.
And her not incestuous.
Wait,
Ancestral line.
did it stop recording?
No, it's going to
My
stop in
God.
60 seconds.
Okay.
How's
Do I
that?
have to do that again?
Enjoy the episode.
Enjoy the episode. I'll
Really
clip it
good.
together.
It's a really good episode.
It is. We promise.
Enjoy, bye.
Oh my gosh.
Zara,
Yes, sir.
where do we want to kick this off? That is the
Very happy
question.
to have you here, considering everything.
Everything
Yes.
you've been through.
Yes.
The
Jesus.
day
Thank
you've
you.
had.
It's
It's been a day and a half.
Been a day by the sound of
It's been a
things.
week of a day,
Ooh.
and it's Monday. Yeah,
Yeah.
they do. Hey,
Mondays tend to be like that.
It has been a bit of a week of a day
For us,
for us
too.
as well. So
Hmm.
this is a
Well,
nice
none of us
way.
have had stitches out.
That's true. It hasn't been quite that medically
If you
charged.
feel like sharing with the people.
No, 100%. So I had a little mole on my back. It's really not that big a deal, guys, but I had a little mole on my back. And I
The
had to get
story
it
is
cut
so much
out.
more disappointing. No,
I had to get it
joking.
cut out just because of my family history with cancer, etc., etc., and it was just a bit concerning. But it was quite a graphic process. I have videos, but I don't think anyone wants to see that.
Those will be up
I
on
wanna
screen.
see
Yeah.
From what I saw afterwards, whatever they injected me with made a dome shape on my back.
Whoa.
And then they like pulled out a section of my skin, dropped it in a little thing, stitched me
Well,
up.
this is my girlfriend's bread and butter. This is what she watches in bed when we're like about to go to bed. And she's like, babe, look, I'm like,
Like that's those
Get away
skin
from me.
scraping things.
yeah,
Oh
the
my
skin's
God.
going, the pimple popping.
I'm not
Moral
gonna-
of the story, make sure you get your moles mapped and look after yourself.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
think
actually,
is,
the
and
great
is the moral
noise.
of
really,
the
really
story.
true,
Check your- what's it?
honestly. Yeah.
Not your scrotum, your...
Yeah, whoa.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
also,
Yeah,
check
your
for
prostate,
cancer.
your prostate.
Check for cancer. Yeah.
Definitely.
Breast
100%.
cancer,
It's Women's
prostate
Month,
cancer.
guys.
it's
Check your
real.
boobs.
Yes.
Check your boobs.
Check
And if you
your
have
titties.
them, check your balls.
Indeed. Look out for
All of
cancer.
it.
Or if you have both, check both.
Yeah, exactly. Each to their own. Okay, well, that may have been somewhat of an accidental good segue.
Complete.
Genderless drip
Gentlest drip.
Ah.
is how.
Ah.
Yeah, it was a bit rough, but we got there in the end.
Oh my
Oh,
God.
Lord.
That's obviously what has brought us all here
100%.
to where we have this
this
conversation.
podcast.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
We're on a podcast,
on this
guys.
podcast.
Where
because of-
what is genderless drip?
Mm.
When did it start?
Mm.
And why did you start?
Mm.
Mm.
Okay, that's a three-part
Three-parter?
question,
Three-parter.
and I have
You can do it
ADHD,
in-
so you're gonna have to repeat each one
He
of
was
those.
got you.
Okay, let's start with.
But I think I'm gonna start with where I started because that kind of leads into the brand story, you know.
Great.
Amen.
Before I continue, should I be looking anyway specific?
Us
No.
or the... You,
Us.
no.
Okay, okay.
The camera is generally a bit awkward unless it's very intentionally
Okay,
looking
great.
at the
No
camera.
worries. Okay, cool. Well, as a child, I grew up in a very Muslim community, Indian Muslim community in Joburg. And that it had a real impact on my life specifically, especially as an adult. But I think it's just because I only processed everything as an adult, you know? And one of my main focuses or passions as a child was always fashion. I mean, I wasn't allowed to watch Britney Spears and I wasn't allowed to watch Atomic Kittens, but I mean, like I had the little phone. I would pretend to call Atomic Kittens in front of my cousins, like tell them that like I was featuring on their next song, performing little Britney Spears songs to
Iconic.
my housekeeper on the side, catching a little glimpse wherever I could, even though it was kind of like banned in my house. But I was always super drawn to those like 2000 influences, and the fact that it was so kind of, the way that I was brought up was so restrictive in terms of what I could and couldn't wear. It really, it was almost like I was trying to unlock a part of myself. And I didn't have access to that part of myself because I was so conditioned to believe that it was wrong. And that was my main struggle growing up as a child, is kind of connecting with that rebel inside of me that was so inherently sexual and overt and in tune with like her clothing and what she liked and what she didn't like. That version of myself as a kid really just struggled with constantly having to conform to what was expected of me, you know? And I mean, my family really did they did try to kind of push that passion for me in little ways. Like, for example, my first Eid present ever that I can remember was a little like light box. I don't know how I can explain it, but you basically like put a piece of paper on top of
Like
it.
tracing, tracing drawings, yeah.
And then it would like light up, and then I would
Tracing
draw.
box.
Yeah. And then I would draw like the little outline of the model, and I had I had millions of flip files and files of all my designs, and I would cut things out of magazines, wherever I could get my hands on them, and just design. And then I remember I must have been about 8. I presented my first like set of designs to my mom, and I called
8?
it, yeah.
That's a good start for a first lookbook.
Yeah, so if you're over 8 and you're trying to start, just dead it.
Give up right
That is
now
a joke.
immediately.
That is a joke.
You've lost your mark. Yeah.
But yeah, I was 8 and I called it my creation. And I was really excited to show this to my parents. Obviously, like, I just made this beautiful design. And the response that I was met with, I vaguely remember, obviously, because I kind of blocked that off. But it was one of my core memories as a child, was that I wasn't allowed to call it my creation because that essentially interfered with the fact that God is the only creator. And yeah, that was kind of the first thing that I remember that almost, now as a fashion designer, I'm looking back and unlocking those memories and realizing I didn't remember that I started designing so early until very recently, you know? But yeah, that was kind of my first little hit, you know, on my self-esteem and, you know, like where I wanted to go in life. And like I said, my clothing was constantly overlooked. Like they wanted me to wear, no, let me not say that. So my parents, for a little bit of context, they studied in Egypt. So they had quite a different approach than like a traditional Muslim community would. So my mom, for example, wore like really beautiful, like bright clothing, but it was always super modest. So she tried to kind of instill that in me. But the external pressure from not immediate family, but what is it called?
Family.
Community.
Yeah.
General community.
Yeah. Cousins, etc.,
Extended
etc.
family.
They were all in full abayas, salar tops, and headscarves, and those were my closest like friends growing up. So I was always the kid coming in and being like, oh, you know, gay rights. Stir the pot a little bit stir the pot a little bit, debate with my father here and there because he had that experience in Egypt and he allowed me to be a little bit more open-minded, you know. But my second experience, particularly with fashion that I have now recalled as a child, is after creating all of those flip files, I must have been about like 12 at this point. I decided to show my dad again, and my father's response was that I really needed to think about this in terms of wanting to take it up as a career, because every person that would wear what I designed would carry that sin. I would carry their sin, basically.
That's a heavy
That is
one.
heavy.
Yeah.
I mean,
How old
I'm
were you
like-
when
I'm
this happened?
12.
Yeah, I'm
12,
21 now. I'm like, geez, sorry,
Someone
Dad.
said that.
Sorry.
Yeah. So as a 12-year-old, and I obviously still was very much within that understanding, or that I was following that particular path of that
Yeah.
faith, because I won't
You
say
hadn't had a chance to expand your
100%,
views.
100%.
Mm.
Yeah, at that particular point, it really just, I mean, it destroyed me because that was what I wanted and that was my passion. And I was like, okay, I can't, how can I continue this and like go to hell? Like I was really, really freaked out. And essentially, I think I dissociated from fashion completely, and even trying to design from that point forward, you know. I did try to go to a little fashion school that was around the corner from St. Teresa's, where I went to high school, but obviously you got to know there. And yeah, but it always came through in my style. Like I said, my mom encouraged me to be conservative. But I always managed to pull through my own unique elements through doing that. Like, for example, we went to Dubai on holiday when I was about 14. And it was my last holiday that I think I took with my mom before she passed. But they were trying to get me to like transition into wearing a headscarf because I'd reached puberty at that time. And I saw all like the beautiful Arab ladies like wearing these like huge like fancy abayas with like their hair like completely like done up here and their fringes out and like makeup. And I was like, you know what? Cool. I'll dress like that, but if you get me those before we leave,
I want
Drip me out like that.
Drip me out
drip
like
me
that.
out like that, and then I'll wear it, my
We
boy.
can talk.
And they did.
So, what? I mean, obviously, your journey through childhood and clothing and
Yes.
expression. How did that materialize into Genderless Drip, and particularly the ethic behind it? Because that I think has always been what's really drawn us to the brand as well, is the
Yes.
ethic behind it more
Yes.
as much as the designs themselves.
100%.
So tell people, about that.
Yeah, so I started designing again, or not necessarily designing. I started upcycling in a really kind of weird space and time, or point in my life rather, where I'd kind of gotten out of a quite abusive relationship, and I'd moved back to Joburg to be with my father. And I had nothing to do. I mean, I was literally just looking, it was the height of COVID, and I was looking for a job for like 8 months. And I really just wanted to get creative with my clothing again, because I'd been in Cape Town. I had my creative expression here. I could dress however I wanted. And I wanted to kind of like play around. So I bought fabric paint, and I got a few scraps and pieces that didn't fit me anymore. And I started making things. This is one of the first things that I made.
So cool.
Just painted on it. Actually, probably the second piece that I made ever. And that's essentially like how I started. At that time, it was called Xara Crafting.
That's very cute.
Yeah. And then essentially, I decided to kind of expand that idea. And one thing that I really noticed was I was quite drawn to men's fashion. And I was quite drawn to mask fashion, you know. And especially when I first started designing in my grandma's room at that time, where I was staying, I mostly started designing men's clothes. I've always kind of not really struggled with my sexuality, but I leave it open-ended. I don't want to put a due date on when I have to figure that out by.
isn't one.
And you don't want to put yourself in a box,
No,
which is where a lot of
exactly.
people,
exactly
you know, find themselves floating in today's society. Is not really knowing or needing to know, because it's just
Exactly.
ever evolving.
exactly
It's most
100%.
relevant what you define as.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone wants their label to feel like, you know, there's this pressure to label yourself to feel a part of various like tribes, because we're such a tribal.
Exactly.
We seem so sophisticated, but we're just tribal
We're just
little
tribal
human
animals.
beings trying to feel belonging. But anyway, so a bit of a tangent.
No,
Continue.
100%. But yeah, and I think that especially kind of drove that. But over and above that, I mean, most of my friends are queer, and just seeing their experiences, and even experiencing from like personally and myself, I shop in the men's section, and it's not a nice experience sometimes watching queer friends go to a female section, for example, or a male section where people who aren't in line with normal views.
I love
kind
that
of
this
react
is
to
this
that,
has
you
been
know?
called the normal view
Yeah.
now. Guys,
As it
That's
should be.
incredible.
Yeah.
things are changing. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. It's a normal thing.
Much for the better, yeah.
So I think that reaction especially drove me to wanting to rebrand in a way that made the brand all inclusive. And I wanted to invite a space or have a space for anyone to feel like they could wear anything. And I think that's where my first line that I dropped, which is quite contradictory to what I first said, is actually very femme inspired because I wanted to make that impact or make that statement. Essentially, in the most overt way possible, because females wearing men's clothes is not, it's not as
It's not new.
it's not
Like
new.
We've been doing
as
that.
judged.
Tomboys have
Yeah. Not as
tomboys
bold,
have been a
it's
thing
not as
for a long time.
Exactly.
You know, my mom would complain that I would, why don't you want to wear dresses? You're always wearing such baggy clothes. It's like,
The Avril Lavigne stage.
yeah, absolutely.
100%.
I was
Little
like
typeface.
very tomboy. But then,
Yeah.
you know, because I got to explore that, they reached a point where I was like, okay, I actually want to like step into my feminine a bit more right
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
And then started wearing dresses and things.
yeah.
And yeah, I like getting to wake up every day and just decide what I feel like being that day, whether it's masculine or feminine or
You touched on something that I wanted to bring up because you when you were telling sort of the full backstory for Genderless Strip and like talking about sort of the very early days and how you got into sort of designing and all that kind of stuff, you touched on something that I've always found very interesting, which is like with parents, the more they restrict you in certain areas, the more sort of forget the word, but the more like you feel like you want to explore those areas. So for instance, like your parents putting very strict boundaries on the kind of clothes you can design and the kind of clothes you can wear and the kind of clothes that are acceptable, that then in your later sort of days and later years kind of like inspired you to push those boundaries and to really
rebel against that.
rebel against them and expand your sort of repertoire. And
100%.
I think that is it's something to like, I don't know our average age of our viewership, but if you are still under your parents' control or under contract with your parents, then keep in mind that there will be a time to explore what you think that you feel is right for yourself. And obviously it may not be available with your current situation, but there will always be a time to expand and to do your own investigation. So yeah, just
I wanted to ask because I mean, it's interesting because I find, you know, with kids always rebel against their parents, whether if they super strict, you're probably going to be more of a rebel. And if they like more lax, you're probably going to be more of a conservative.
I don't know about that one.
no,
It can go that way. It can go that way. I have people in mind, but I don't don't feel like mentioning them right now.
The general sentiment of
I mean, like the general sentiment is you rebel against your parents in either direction. And when you mentioned like, you know, you wanted to, those things that your parents said to you in response at those very key moments where you was, you know, you proud of something you've done as a young child and you trying to get validation from your parents, which is very important in developmental
100%.
years. And then having those like shot down in very, you know, it wasn't just like, oh no, we don't like that. We don't agree with it. It's like our whole religion, our whole community, our whole, you know, to the point of God doesn't agree with this.
Yeah, to the point that you're gonna carry all that sin and go to hell.
Yes, exactly. Like that attaches so much guilt to something that you are passionate about as a young child, which, you know, when you started talking, I was like, wow, this chick has just absolutely reconnected with her inner child and is expressing that through this new form that she's always been passionate about, but rediscovering. And I'm very comfortable with the idea of blocking out traumatic memories that then pop up at like really random annoying times. And they're like, hi. And you're like, fuck, can't even remember that happened.
But then it all makes sense
But then it all makes sense.
Exactly.
So it's really interesting to see like it doesn't feel to me like when you speak, you have a lot of guilt attached to that. But I wanted to ask like, how's that process work? Like getting over that?
Yeah. I mean, I only touched on this with my therapist literally on Tuesday.
Oh, wow.
Great timing.
Divine
if that's
timing.
too soon, we can totally like.
we can take another.
We can segue.
I think I'm definitely still figuring it out. And it's something that I'm going to have to deal with as I grow this brand. But essentially my power is within the fact that I am doing it, and that I'm living my childhood dream. Like my first line, and I'm pretty sure like 2000s is always going to pull through to Genderless Trip, is literally inspired by all those icons like Lizzie McGuire, Britney Spears, like literally
Avril Lavigne.
Yeah,
Nice.
yes,
Dude.
100%. You can definitely see her inspiration pull through in my Get Ready With Me's, the little Thai moment. But yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a journey. And I'm so grateful that I actually have the opportunity to explore that with my therapist, and I'm so grateful that I actually was able to unlock those memories because it showed me that I always kind of felt out of place in the fashion community because I'd never gone to school for it, wasn't allowed to, and I didn't really know where to start. And oh, sorry guys, I lost my train of thought. Someone
That's
please
good.
remind me.
That's okay.
We were talking about guilt and how you're working through it. Like specifically in...
I'm trying to retrace my words. Apologies.
No problem.
It's okay if it comes back.
If it comes back, we'll come back to
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
something else I
Good.
was, so that we can move on, something else I was going to ask is, and if this is too personal, completely feel free to opt out, but are you still religious?
Yes.
Yes. And
Yeah. I went through a phase where I definitely wasn't.
mm,
And then a few things happened in my personal life, especially when I was in that relationship that I mentioned early on, where it essentially started off as a spiritual, more kind of universal understanding. Like it was kind of like a loop that happened in my life that brought me back to that moment. But I was still figuring it out. And I am still figuring it out. But essentially, I am Muslim, and I still do describe like I am Muslim. I just have a very different approach to most people, and I think that everything should be interpreted like
your
by
own
you.
experience.
You should interpret
so
every single
interesting
thing.
because I mean, I was raised by very spiritual parents. I mean, you could have classified them back in the day as hippies, although
No, you still can.
Technically qualified.
I don't know if I would classify my parents as hippies anymore at all. Lorcan knows my
Nah,
parents.
I would.
Just for context, Lorcan and I have known each other since we were very, very small people. So,
No, your
So-
parents are hippies. I'm gonna be dead honest with you.
Clive, maybe.
Moving on. Agree to
Moving
disagree.
on. I don't want to talk about him. Alright, can we cut that? We're cutting that name
Okay,
out of this podcast. Just that part. Anyway, fuck, now I lost my train of thought. No, I knew what I was saying.
Spiritual
I was
parents.
raised by quite spiritual parents with a brother who has a different father to me, and he was atheist and very different from my family. So and probably raised more by my brother because he just decided that my parents weren't doing a good enough job and that he would take over because he was more conservative than my parents ever were, you know. So it's interesting because I've had this idea of like religion was never really a thing in my house, but spirituality definitely was. And I use the name God because it holds the same weight with other people as what I'm talking about when I talk about my belief system and my faith.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And when I was younger talking about this, a lot of people were like, whoa, that's so like new and interesting. Like I've never heard anyone speak like that. But nowadays, most people I talk to, whether they were raised religious or atheist or you know, spiritual or don't have any direction at all, have landed in this kind of space where it's about like what you take from it and like finding your way of approaching it, not so much like you have to stick in this box to call yourself that or to call yourself this. And it's beautiful because I find myself relating to people like you who, you know, if we met when we were super young, probably wouldn't have related at all to each other. You know, you being raised in quite a strict religion versus me, like, I don't know, your parents probably wouldn't have liked me very much. Probably not. We wouldn't have been allowed to be friends. But now it's so cool because most people I chat to, that's where they land in that belief system.
It's amazing how much everything's changed, like literally since I can't even remember when I was in high school, maybe like 10 years ago. it's really
Yeah.
transformed. And
People are.
How old are you?
Yeah.
I am 24.
Okay, yeah.
I meant like
10
mid-high
years
school.
ago?
Think
Okay.
about it.
I was
it's
also in high
like-
school 10 years. No, I wasn't.
You would have been in
No, I
high school,
wasn't.
not
Yeah.
that much longer ago. Like
We would have
starting
been
high school.
11
Think
going
about
on
that.
12.
That's like
Starting
it's
high
like
school.
You
eight-
start high school at 12.
Yeah.
No, you start at 13.
13.
You start at
technically.
13.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
you start in your 14th year.
Yeah.
The year you turn
start when
14,
you're
so you're probably
Yeah.
13.
Mm.
Yeah.
Anyway.
8 years ago. Anyways,
Yeah.
8 or 9 years.
Do you guys mind if I quickly grab a jacket? Otherwise, I'm going to start
Absolutely.
shaking.
No.
Go for it.
Please have a jacket break.
Can I have a sip of your water? Is that water?
Yes.
Who spilled?
Is it water? What? I didn't spill.
Where?
I'm asking who spilled.
Where?
Now you are. Oh, just
Careful. There's
Careful, the
a
other
water glass.
cup, yeah.
It's
Unless you saw me
minor.
spill, and this is a passive aggressive question.
Oh no! I was wondering why there's a puddle down
Promise.
there.
I definitely. No, I don't think I did.
Promise I didn't see you spill.
Mila, just help Zara with the mic. Pivot it away a little bit. There we go.
Okay.
And then, yeah, just come this way a little bit more, Zara, like
This way.
towards Mila, yeah.
I'm gonna
And then
restart.
rotate it.
Oh, no, thank
Mila, there we go. That's better.
Amazing.
It was great, but do you wanna?
need to sink down.
Am I wearing?
I'll wear it.
Athletics.
Ooh.
Um,
Can I?
yes.
Thank you.
What was that?
Because he was thinking, but I don't feel like he had like a fully formed thought yet, and I do.
Go for it.
So I was gonna say, like, I think it's really great that you were able to like reconcile like with your faith and stuff,
Mm.
because for some people, I don't think they would have been able to like overcome those like differences.
Mm.
But I think that is the thing, like with our generation, like Mila said, you take from it what you need, and it's like really beautiful that you can like proudly say that like you are Muslim. For like
Yeah.
other people growing up, or not even growing up, like adults have issues.
Yeah.
Like people that feel
The most.
similarly,
Adults have issues.
Adults have the most
that there
issues.
doesn't need to be like a disconnect,
Mm.
you know.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like people have, in our generation, finally started to realize that books written 2,000 years ago weren't meant to be followed like
Oh my
textbooks.
God.
Oh no,
Yeah.
they still
Who'd
need
have
to realize
thunk
that.
it? Maybe they were just a collection of stories with morals.
Indeed.
You
That we
take
need to
your own
unpack.
interpretation.
Yeah.
That
for
literally the
yourself.
books say that.
And I-
But anyways,
I like what you said, like take from
From
it.
it.
Sorry guys. Take from it what you need.
Mm.
Because in my reality, like my God is all forgiving and loves every aspect of myself, even the parts of myself that like are very destructive, you know?
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
or the super sexual parts of myself. Like my God
Yeah.
isn't looking at me
My
going,
God is an awesome God.
yeah, he's fucking sick, dude. Jesus
My
is
God is
my
better than
awesome
yours.
boy.
He's my bro.
Exactly.
I chat to him every
Anyone
morning.
else?
Every, like that's
For
the thing. It's
him.
like
Yeah, I went
I
to
don't know,
yeah,
I started praying.
You what?
I started praying, but
Mm.
like I didn't know who to pray to because I'd never been raised with a God. So
Yeah.
I prayed to my grandmother
Mm,
and I prayed to like my ancestral line
mm.
and you know, Jesus.
Yeah.
Because why not?
Shout
Yeah,
out.
why not?
Shout
Shout
out
out
Jesus.
grandmother,
Amen.
Jesus, and who
Why
was
not?
the ancestral line?
You know,
Shout out to everyone's grandma,
Shout
ancestral
out to
line,
Granny,
and
Jesus, and my ancestral line.
my ancestry.
I mean, yeah.
You're getting Mila through it.
That's a
Oh,
That's
man.
great.
thanks, Granny Carrie.
that's a holistic religious experience.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
But I also, my dad's Jewish, and I.
My dad's Jewish too. That's so cool.
Things are going well.
So bad. I got you, girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
As much as I love talking about religion, I do want to know, like, what is the plan for Genderless Trip? Like, what's happening now? Like, I'm so excited and curious.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I'm super excited too. Okay, cool. I'm trying to think of where to start, but there's been a lot of movement in the past month, I'd say. So at the moment, I've recently left my super corporate 9 to 5 to find myself. Yeah. Actually, no, I can't say that about my new job. Hold on. Let me wait. Hold on.
Think about phrasing here.
You didn't say
Tone.
it. It's fine.
Yeah. So
I also
left-
can't chat shit about my job on these podcasts.
Yo, you guys all.
This
I
is
was like,
part of your job.
That's
think
the
that was
joke,
the joke.
Lorcan. God.
Sorry.
Love you, dude.
But yeah, I've just left a super, it kind of was quite constricting 9 to 5. Although like I really did gain so much experience over there.
Sorry.
The
That was
two of you.
inappropriate.
Sorry,
Okay.
Zara. Please
No
continue.
worries,
Excuse the
guys.
very rude
I'm
interrupt.
so
Please
sorry.
Don't apologize. I am one of those people, so I get it.
Yeah, it's like getting the giggles in class.
Yeah,
Like,
you literally
I
can't
know.
help it.
So much guilt,
You
but like-
literally can't help it. I am one of those people. I was that person in high school.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, the 9 to 5,
Um,
the new job.
But yeah, so I recently got a new job, and that is remote, which is so helpful. So I've started to build a little home office. I met my amazing best friend a few months ago. Yes, she's doing
Shout
great
out.
It'd be like
now.
awkward if
Shout
it's a different
out.
best friend, but like
No.
our beautiful studio audience.
We love
Shout
a
out
studio audience.
there. And you know, because I was kind of working remotely sometimes at my previous job, and then like 2 weeks in office, it was obviously like going back into office after COVID kind of thing. My bestie came to me and she was like, "Listen, Z, like listen, X, I'm learning so much from already being like around you, because she's also studying and she wants to go into marketing, and that's what I do for my 9 to 5. I'm a account director on advertising. And she was just like, "Listen, I'm learning so much from being around you and just like listening in, and from what you tell me. So wouldn't you mind like maybe considering hiring me as some sort of internship?" And I was like, "No, absolutely." You know, like I started off as a social media manager when my dad dropped me in Cape Town, but let's talk about that another time. And I grew my way up to an account director. So I mean, and I understand now why that happened, to be able to manage my brand on my own and know how to run a through the line campaign for Genderless drip eventually, which is super valuable. But I knew at the same time that I wasn't going to have capacity to, you know, support that and support the financial goals of the business without having another strong support next to me that was willing to work just as hard. So yeah, that's just been absolutely incredible. We've set up my little apartment into a home office. And yeah, we've gotten like a little clothing rack. We got like what do you call those, convex mirrors, those little cool ones that are trending on Instagram right now, to set up as part of our little Genderless drip setup. Some LED lights,
Very nice.
mannequins. We've like repainted mannequins.
That's cool.
Working on these little earrings and a few more earrings
Little
to come
teaser.
out.
Little
my God, I
teaser.
can't
See-
wait.
See how far you can
Yeah.
zoom in on those.
Chains over here that we're working on too, that I'm super excited about. And then in terms of like next steps for us, I am designing a few collaborations kind of upcoming, but I can't really confirm yet.
Is one of them the meeting you had
Um,
before our last meeting? Is that
Yes,
sick?
yes, but it's not confirmed. That's why I don't want to.
You
mention
can't
it,
know.
but yeah.
You guys can't know. But we have the inside scoop.
But yeah, I am just so looking forward to it. The home office is looking completely stunning. And yeah, V, my best friend / Pierre, is gonna be taking over in terms of also like supporting the actual process. I mean, we're completely sustainable. So we look for dead stock fabrics and then obviously rework those into our own items, and also thrift items and then rework those. So all of those kinds of like administrative bits is going to be, it's really going to assist. And then the creative element that comes through afterwards is me actually painting on the items. And yeah, we're super excited. I don't want to reveal too much, but
Yeah.
I'm super excited about what I've been working on so far. And I think what you guys will be seeing is a lot more of a mask influence. there definitely is going to be
Boo.
some.
Sorry.
So what I'm planning to do for this next launch or for this next drop rather is to have a few items or a few collections, a few sets of outfits rather that are more mask, and then 3 sets that are more femme, because essentially the femme outfits are also me getting to live my little Britney Spears dream out. So yeah, I think that's kind of going to be my approach. And I'm really excited about the kinds of designs and messaging that I want to bring across in this drop, as opposed to my previous one, which was, I mean, I think that art style will always still pull through, a very like kind of dark art style, but I want to focus more on, I love anime and I love the female body, and I think I've always brought that into my clothing. And yeah, I don't want to say too much, but
I'm so excited.
yeah.
Get
Leave them
excited.
wanting
Yeah.
more.
Anime, female bodies,
Yeah.
darkness.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And lots of safety pins,
Calm.
lots of chains and safety
Guys.
pins.
Lorcan, bring us back.
I was gonna ask before Mila gets too
There's a lot
emotional.
to talk to her ancestral line about tonight.
Just like, yo, granny. No, I was gonna ask along a similar vein. For it could be the next year, it could be the next 5 years, it could be the next month. But where do you see sort of expansions for Genderless Strip? It could be within the fashion industry. It could be outside if you want to bring it more into like a musical sort of aspect.
Yep.
Where are some of the sort of avenues that you see Genderless Strip going down in the
100%.
future?
I definitely see it as a creative collaboration, essentially, eventually. My dream / goal is to have, I don't really know how to put it, but not necessarily a store, but I want to have an experience. I want to have a place that people can come to for an experience. And the whole experience would be kind of inspired, obviously, by the clothing that is around and available for purchase. But I have touched in DJing, and I love music and I enjoy it so much. And I think that's always something that I'm going to want to do, especially if I didn't have my 9 to 5. I think that's what I would be doing. So yeah, I think I'd really love to bring in kind of like the musical element. I'd love to bring in, I paint as well, just on canvas. I'd love to collaborate with other artists on those pieces. I write a lot of poetry, and I've always wanted to work on this book, just within the 9 to 5. I've never had an actual chance to. Where I collaborate with artists that work in different mediums, and kind of incorporate their art style onto each page, like give them all my poems and see which one resonates with them, and then say it's embroidery, do that, and then let's find a way to insert it into that book, and then it's an experience from each artist and their take on whatever is in that poem, and a space for all of that to happen, and for that poetry and that book to live, and for everyone to just come and share, and to experience. On top of that, I would also like to have the psychedelic element, which is a big kind of part of Genderless Drip, tying into especially like edibles, and then also touching on LSD and mushrooms. They have been incredible medicines for me, specifically as someone who suffers with PTSD. CPTSD, to explore those parts of my brain, and to unlock
Proactive
that.
uses.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Did you say CPSTD?
CPTSD.
CPTSD.
Yeah. So not
Which
many
stands
people complex PTSD,
Okay.
which is actually very different to PTSD.
Which is complex post-traumatic
Interesting. I
stress
have
disorder. if
Yeah.
you
absolutely
didn't know.
no idea what the
Yeah.
difference
I've
is.
also never
Yeah.
heard that.
You feel like explaining?
So yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to. So PTSD basically occurs over one traumatic instance.
PTSD.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be actually
go to
let me
war.
not give examples, but like
Yeah.
well, yeah,
Go to
the
war.
common
Yeah.
example
Yeah.
would be going to war and having
Yeah.
that experience and then trying to function in normal society.
Exactly. Whereas complex PTSD comes from multiple traumatic events that basically mess with your brain chemistry in a different way. I
Like
don't
your
really know how-
psyche.
your
Yeah.
psyche and your chemistry in a different way. It kind of rewires your brain
Well,
in a different
you
way.
know.
So yeah.
I'm
Trying to give examples of what
You don't have
CPTSD would look like.
CPTSD could be like a rough family like situation.
It's
where,
multiple
Yeah,
events.
there's not
so
like
like
one
an
standout.
unstable family environment.
Yeah,
like
it
an
could be that, and then like another traumatic event, and then another traumatic
So
event.
usually
and then
those all
another
stem
traumatic
from
event.
each other anyway, because if you're raised in a family structure where there's not a lot of stability, and that can look very different
Exactly.
in different,
Yes.
like in your case, it's probably going to look different from me. But I also had like quite an untrustworthy childhood where I couldn't rely that my parents would react the same way or react safely if I needed to go to them about something, or so that kind of resulted in me in having like a fear around certain things.
Yeah.
And I'm also not going to go way into specifics here, but like that fear then translated into my relationships, and
Yeah.
I was unstable and uncertain, and then they were projecting that stuff onto me, and then that kind of plays out,
Yes.
and then that informs those next traumatic experiences is how I'm understanding it,
100%. Absolutely.
and then deepens that psychological
Absolutely.
and
yeah.
psyche damage, I
Yes,
guess.
definitely. And especially, I mean, growing up in an environment where you're not really given many resources to equip yourself for that next stage. If it doesn't go according to what they or what your family sees it to be, you're essentially just kind of gonna be
failed.
dropped there,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna make bad decisions that eventually lead you to more traumatic experiences, But essentially, all of those experiences tie back to, personally, I'm speaking personally, not for anyone else, tie back to actually what your true mission is and why. There's a reason for everything, I think, at the end of the day. Like,
Yeah.
I
So,
realized.
as
Like you
a-
wouldn't be who you were if you hadn't
Exactly.
gone through that stuff.
Exactly.
And
yeah. I
you're
wouldn't
pretty
be
cool.
here.
I
Yeah.
mean, I just met you, but
as a
Thanks, appreciate.
as a way to bring things to a close, Lorks, unless you have something
no, I'm just
Okay.
kidding.
unless you have something particularly
Blushing.
urgent. But
No, I'm good.
I wanted to, as a kind of way to wrap this all up, is
I have so many more things to say. How
part
are we
two,
wrapping
part
up?
two, because we got to do that
Okay.
40 minutes.
Yeah.
We'll definitely do a part two, but a lot of what we've talked about is revolved around childhood and acknowledging your inner child, and how various
And
things,
unleashing it later on in life.
and then
Mm.
wounded child
Mm.
in parents who then pass things on to their children,
Yeah.
generational trauma and all
Trauma.
that shit. What
And
would
Granny
be
Carrie.
your what would be your piece of advice for someone who feels like they have either consciously or unconsciously, there's a part of their inner child that they haven't been able to acknowledge or unlock because of, and I think for a lot of people, it can be religious based or religion based shame. What would be your advice? I think particularly interestingly, as someone who is religious but just takes a different perspective on it, what would be your advice to someone to release that inner child and acknowledge them?
My advice would be to do what feels like what you shouldn't do. Do what you feel like you shouldn't do. Just do it and see how that makes you feel.
Because then you get the perspective of either side of the spectrum, and you're able to marry it in the middle. I really like that.
And then see how you feel afterwards.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I
on
think
that note,
that was a pretty nice, succinct way to wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining us, Xara. Thank you for your time and for sharing
Thank you,
your
guys.
stories with us.
It's such a
Really
pleasure.
appreciate it. Thanks, homies, for
On that
joining
note.
in for a very an exciting episode.
I can't believe we're
Yeah.
ending.
Yeah,
I literally have
that
so much
was-
more to
I know
say.
this is that 40-minute thing. This 40-minute podcasts are hard. I told you.
Yeah.
Is
Comment-
this 40 minutes? Have we been sitting here for 40 minutes?
45.
Okay.
45.
Comment
Wow.
Genderless if you've
45,
watched this far
45.
into the episode. Thank you so much for watching.
Okay. You're just actually no. We should encourage
Yeah.
people to watch to the end.
That's what
but
I'm saying.
Every podcast we've done so far, No one's commented.
That's what I was
But
saying.
that's, you gotta
It
do like
hurts
a
our
question,
feelings.
like if you have PTSD or
No.
Just comment
if
gender.
you
Like,
suffer
subscribe,
childhood
like,
trauma
subscribe,
like us,
like, subscribe,
and
like,
leave a comment.
Leave
like-
a comment.
Like, subscribe,
share-
follow
share
Xara
to-
and Genderless Drip on Instagram. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow all of us if you have spare time in your day. Enjoy your day. Love you
Big
lots. See
time.
you on the next episode. Bye.
Peace.